Hi, Biscus. Hello, dudes, dudettes, duders, and everyone in between, and welcome to How to Do Everything So You Don't Have to, a series where we teach you how to think like a producer. And the Trinity is now complete. We've shot quarter frame stereo, slightly more than half frame stereo, and now we're talking about medium format stereo. This is the Sputnik, a medium format stereo camera produced in Russia from the mid-50s through the mid-70s. In this review, we're going to take a look at what it does well, the walls you're likely to run into when using it, and of course, whether or not it's worth the cost of entry. We'll be sharing images with you throughout, so be sure to fetch your Holmes-style viewer from the parlor for maximum enjoyment of this review. Now, let's get into it so that you can get back to spending way too much money on medium format film. The Sputnik is a capable little beast built for shooting stereo images. It has all of the basic functionality you would expect from a film camera from this era and a couple of extras to give you a bit more control over how you create your images. Of course, you can control aperture, shutter speed, and focus, but beyond that, the Sputnik also has a bulb release, a flash sync, and a timer for those 3D selfies you might want to take. A center lens on the camera gives you the rough average of what the two film lenses are seeing through a waist-level viewfinder. The viewfinder has a couple of quality of life features, including a magnifying glass for focus checks, a set of arrows along the perimeter to help you keep the horizon level and frame up the subject in the center, and on some models, like the international version, a bubble to make sure your camera is bang on level when shooting. Underneath the camera, you'll find a tripod thread, and on the back, you'll find the only other feature, which is a frame counter window. This frame counter is nothing sophisticated though, a simple red tinted window on the back that allows you to barely see the frame number printed on the film strip. The Sputnik allows for double exposing the film, though I should mention that this doesn't feel like an add-on feature that required engineering so much as a shortcut in that there's no lock on the lens to prevent recocking and opening the shutter after the film has been exposed once. It really doesn't feel like a feature so much as a flaw promoted to feature status. While earlier models are more limited, later models have lenses that run the gamut from f4.5 straight through to f22. It's a similar concern with the shutter speed, with older models capping at 1/100th of a second and later models running up to 1/125th of a second. Regarding exposure, the Sputnik feels consistently more consistent than the Realist or the ViewMaster cameras. Both of those cameras reveal pretty significant exposure variance between the two lenses that has to be corrected in post. This is not such an issue on the Sputnik, with pairs coming out much closer to each other in color cast and exposure. While the camera might be functionally minimalist, there are some interesting design elements worth commenting on. The first thing you'll notice about this camera is how delightfully steampunk it is. Aperture is controlled by a little arm that locks both lenses in sync, meaning that if you're adjusting one, you're adjusting both. Focus is similarly coupled, but even cooler. Focus adjustments affect all three lenses using a clever gear system. When you adjust focus on one lens, you adjust all three automatically, and it's certainly eye-catching out in the field. Focus is measured in meters, and there's a cute bit of cheekiness here that I've never seen before. As you run through the focal distances, you'll see that the markings are at 1.4 meters, 2.8, 4, 5.6, 8, and 11. I like this. Sure, it's less practical, leading to large gaps between numbers to accommodate a log scale instead of a linear one, but it's more fun. I'm assuming that the designers who made this camera were not repurposing aperture rings from other lenses, because the focus goes all the way to infinity, and I don't know many irises that do that. So I can say with confidence that the focus ring is nothing less than a good bit of whimsical Soviet comedy. As far as viewfinders go, this is hands down the best one of any of the stereo cameras we've been shooting on. Not that previous viewfinders were anything to crow about. The best thing I could say about them on the ViewMaster personal stereo camera and the Stereo Realist was that they would set you up for success by degrading your preview so much that it would nudge you into bold and clear compositions, which play better in 3D than overly busy images. These viewfinders are so terrible that you will be forced into minimalist compositions isn't exactly high praise now, is it? The best thing about the waist level viewfinder is that you look at it with both eyes, which means that you're getting a stereo preview and you'll have some idea of what the depth will look like in the final prints. That said, this is a waist level viewer and stereo portraits play best at eye level, meaning you'll be standing on stools, chairs, and the tippity top of your tippy toes to frame up your images if the model is standing. The magnifying glass is extremely helpful in finding focus, but it's still a fairly rough device, and you'll likely never feel terrifically confident that you're pinned sharp. That would be fine, except that this will make you want to stop down to increase the margin of error for finding focus. Unfortunately, stopping down has a knock-on effect of revealing lens flaws. The sharper your image is, the higher quality the glass has to be to deliver images that are more about the subject than about the camera's limitations. Simply put, this isn't the best glass we've ever worked with, and how could it be? These are Russian pancake lenses that are half a century old. They're simply not going to compete with precision-engineered G-mount lenses or Nisis. The engineering isn't as precise on these antiques as that on modern lenses, and they've been out in the wild for decades now. The wear and tear really adds up. And that's part of the reason we bought 3 of these cameras. The first 2 we picked up had one lens that was pin sharp and one that was a bit whack. Not wiggity whack, just a little bit whack. It wasn't until the third one that we were seeing images that delivered the resolution and clarity on both lenses that we need to see to justify the cost of medium format. Something interesting we discovered was that even though one lens on the camera was poorly aligned, the 3D effect wasn't terribly diminished. When your brain averages 2 images, it seems to compensate for any flaws, designating a hero image and focusing on that for the main information. Unfortunately, that only feels true when viewing the pair in stereo, and when you look at the images without a viewer, the imperfections on the non-hero lens jump out. While it's interesting to track how the brain automatically corrects for signal variance between your 2 eyes, medium format is simply too expensive for equipment that's halfway there. Speaking of medium format, let's talk about the cost. This is not a cheap camera to shoot on. We budget $40 per roll for stock, processing, and scanning. Just for comparison, a 35mm roll gives you about 72 exposures on the ViewMaster personal stereo camera. That means you're spending about 55 cents per exposure. The Stereo Realist averages about 26 exposures per roll, which lands you around $1.50 per exposure. You're getting 6 exposures per roll on the Sputnik, which lands you at an elegant 666 per shot. That means that one click costs more than $6. That adds up fast. And what do you get for your troubles? Well, portrait quality images, that's what. If you're using the camera for snapshots, you might get a bit frustrated by the return on investment. If candids are your thing, you'll have a lot more fun with something like the Stereo Realist. But if you're in a studio and able to control the lighting, you might find that this camera delivers goods that justify the cost. That said, you don't have a lot of freedom with this camera. The Sputnik is not a medium format SLR with multiple lens options and the ability to precisely control image creation. You get what you get and you don't get upset. You won't be bending the Sputnik around the will of the image, you'll be bending the image around the will of the Sputnik. The features on this camera are very limited, and the lens is the lens is the lens. That said, if you plan your shooting around the Sputnik and execute accordingly, you can create some incredibly detailed and captivating images. Something to keep in mind is that Holmes-type viewers, whether it's an antique Victorian device or a ViewMaster, magnify the image you're looking at, which reveals details you might not have been aware of when looking at a print with the naked eye. The detail you can access with the Sputnik that you can't with the Stereo Realist or the ViewMaster personal stereo camera is revealed when you look at the prints in the viewer. And to really receive the benefit of that detail, you'll need to be finishing and printing your stereo plates at 600 dots per inch. The Sputnik takes 55mm by 55mm square images, which translate perfectly to 3x7 prints, the standard format for the traditional Holmes viewer. While we haven't done any contact printing from the negatives ourselves, they are the perfect size for making your own cards directly from the negatives. This is really exciting because it means we could have an entirely analog 3D pipeline in our relatively small studio with no need for enlargers or scanners. It's a compelling idea and one that we might explore over the next year. But is it worth the cost of entry? The camera has its place in our collection, even if it's not our first pick for stereo imaging. When we want to create high-resolution stereo portraits, this is the camera we would reach for. Sure, the edges of the images get chewed up pretty badly, but the main point of interest, that is, the center of the image, resolves well enough. Also, 3D images create field of view experiences when dropped into the viewer, and it's kind of okay if fidelity rolls off in the periphery. That's not where the main action is anyway, but let's be honest, that's just my rose-tinted 3D glasses talking again. The reality is that the stereo realist is still the sweet spot for the images we're creating. Ektar 100 on the realist has more than enough detail to create captivating Holmes-style prints that still have that romantic film feel to them. If you want something that is more accurate than what the realist delivers, I imagine you'd be better off getting a pair of digital cameras and rigging them side by side. Not only would you get more technically accurate images, you also remove the per image cost, which is not insignificant when you get into stereo medium format. While the camera is affordable compared to other stereo film cameras, the cost in film adds up really quickly. A single exposure on the Sputnik costs 5 times as much as an exposure on the realist, and I can tell you right now, you aren't getting 5 times the quality. I'm not even convinced you're getting double the quality when jumping from the realist to the Sputnik. Sure, you're printing to a much larger piece of film, but the ceiling is at the lens, not the film plane. It doesn't matter how much you enlarge the grimy image these 50-year-old pancake lenses throw, you're just getting more 50-year-old pancake grime. That's not to say that there's no fun to be had with this camera. Indeed, there's plenty. It's a medium format stereo camera that's half a century old. If that's not fun, I don't know what is. It allows for double exposure and has a timer which opens up worlds of fun ideas you can play with, just so long as you don't mind spending $5 in 1/125th of a second every time you want to do a creative experiment. Also, and I'm not joking when I say this, the thing looks awesome. There is no finesse to the design, and the exposed gears and the joint aperture arm are absolutely eye-catching. Also, because of how this camera is built, it's really easy to crack the back open, fix the lens open in bulb mode, and demonstrate how a camera throws light onto a film plane using a piece of paper. So, educational and fun. Am I glad we got one? Of course! Am I glad we had to buy 3 before we found one that worked? Well, that's another question, and I honestly can't say that I'm thrilled. But now that I have 3, it's possible to start imagining a fully analog stereo surround immersive visual experience shot entirely on medium format, which, I can't even pretend that that's a good idea. So let's all turn off YouTube and get back to creating breathtaking stereo medium format images.